We're starting off kind of rough here with Jet Moto. And yes, I know Jet Moto did actually come out. A few of them did, actually. However, this one did not. This is Jet Moto 2124. It was supposed to come out in 2000, but due to the poor sales of Jet Moto 3, it was cancelled. But this build is, as far as I know, what they had before cancellation. And what they had wasn't fantastic. This game feels like you're driving on ice, which doesn't make sense because these are like hovercrafts, right? You want to move forward an inch, you end up moving forward like 50 miles. The bots seem to have the same problem. Speaking of the bots, they don't really seem to do much. I've only gotten them to ever work on a few maps, and they're not fantastic. Better than me though, I'm awful at driving games. They can at least go in a straight line. Not for long though. They'll eventually try to stop to take a turn, but since the physics are so slippery, they'll slide off the edge of the map and die. They do respawn, but half of them will just keep falling off and the other half will actually be able to turn. Maybe different racers would be better. You do get to choose who you play as, or you're supposed to be able to. When you get to choose a racer, you can only cycle through about 3 of them before the game just freezes on you. Same with maps, linger too long and it will just freeze on you. What's here is interesting, but that's really all there is on this. I figured I would go ahead and bring it up because I didn't see anyone else ever mention this, despite the files floating around for quite some time. I do wonder though, how close this actually was to being released. The first Oni was a third-person melee fighter, but it did have a few guns in there. Honestly, I haven't played it. I want to, I just haven't gotten around to it. The original game was made by Bungie, however the second one is being made by Angel Studios. This is probably the most unfinished thing here on the list. The build I'm playing is from 2002, supposedly around when it got cancelled. There's about 60 levels in this build, and most of them are like nothing. A lot of them are just this grid wasteland with 1 or 2 characters in there just messing around. There are a few, quote, levels, if you can call them that. They're mainly just kind of blockouts, if anything. It's crazy to think this is all they had done after 2 years. 2 years isn't much nowadays, but back then, we could have an entire game done plus an expansion. It also probably didn't help that the developer Angel Studios only ever made racing games before this. Angel Studios was eventually bought out by Rockstar for their Rage engine. During the buyout, they decided to cancel Oni too. Probably for the better. The game files call this NX, but the title screen calls it Call of Duty Future Warfare. We're just going to be calling it Future Warfare. This was the first and only Call of Duty game ever in development by Neversoft. Neversoft is probably more well known for their Tony Hawk and Guitar Hero games. This build is from 2011 to 2012. Despite what the title menu tells you, you can only play a few campaign missions. The Spec Ops side mode is all just Modern Warfare 2 stuff, as they were using that for a base. It also just doesn't work and crashes the game. And then there's multiplayer. Supposedly, you can get this to work. However, I've tried about everything under the sun and nothing works to get this thing going. Which sucks because it would have been cool to see all the weird guns they added. So for this video, we could only unfortunately check out the handful of campaign missions. I can only really play about 4 of them. The others just, again, crash the game. There are 2 types of levels in this. On Earth and on the Moon. The On Earth campaign is admittedly a little boring. The missions seem like they've been literally ripped from Modern Warfare 2, like some sort of weird expansion pack. They play the exact same, and even share some of the same weapons, although those just might be placeholders. I would also probably be more invested if I knew the story. All I really know is it's something to do with the cartels down in Mexico, I think. I'm not exactly sure. The missions on the Moon are actually where it gets kinda interesting, at least for me personally. The weapons are really interesting. You have this little pistol that shoots like exploding balls. It's also blatantly overpowered. You also have to manage your spacesuit. It's not like the on-Earth missions where your health regenerates. You actually have to use like patches and stuff to fix your spacesuit. It's really interesting. I'd kinda like to see a whole Call of Duty just like this. The other space level is pretty unfinished but playable to an extent. You have to be really careful. It takes place on this like weird space train thing. If you stand in the wrong place at the wrong time, you can just be kicked off the train for no reason, or just straight up fall through it. You do get to see some new space guns in this level, like this rifle thing. You also get to see some dialogue at the end of this level. Something about nukes and snakes, I'm not exactly sure, to tell you the truth. That's about it for this game. There are some more campaign, quote, levels, but they look to be just more like item tests, and they also just crash the game. Get shocked when I say this, I've never seen Akira. I seem to say something like this every other video. I would like to see it though. However, this is a movie tie-in game, and as it's commonly known, most of those aren't usually very good. But enough with that, let's actually get to the game. One thing to note with this game is that half the levels just don't work. They either have insane graphical glitches, or they just straight up freeze your system. So I'll show you the levels I can. We'll just start from the beginning with the first two levels, because they're pretty much the exact same thing with the same problem. What this level is supposed to be is that you're riding on your motorcycle and you're supposed to be kicking enemies off of you. However, there's a big problem with this level is that no enemies spawn. It's just an endless highway. And since the second mission is an exact copy of this, it's just another endless highway on a different motorcycle. The next level is in a hospital. This one's a bit different as it's in the first person perspective. And since you're in the hospital, you can shoot orbs from your hand that instantly obliterate people. You know, just like real life. Besides that, there's nothing going on. There are some NPC doctors that spawn, but they don't do anything until you get up and touch them. And after you touch them, they'll just wander around, so they're not really a threat. You can still obliterate them though. The next level is a classic sewer level. Every game back then had one. This is the first level with some sort of, quote, threat, kind of. This level's like a side-scrolling beat-em-up kinda, but you, the player, can't take any damage. However, the enemies can. They're supposed to be soldiers, but they look more like hunters or something. I guess since they don't hurt you, you don't have to kill them, but I recommend you do so if you want to explore the level at all. Because if there's any more than 2 of them on the screen, your game will dip into the single-digit frame rates, almost being unplayable, which is to be expected from a game that was never finished, of course. And then after the sewer level is another hospital level, this time with even less to do, as there's no doctors that spawn in. However, there are a ton of rooms. I was debating at one point if this was randomly generated or not, just because it seems to keep going and going. Then there's one more final level that's playable, at least, where you're on some sort of like car scooter thing with a minigun on the bottom. I can't seem to get very far in it though, and that's about it for this game. Like I said, most of this game is pretty unplayable. Supposedly, there are a few more builds out there in the wild of this game. Some being even more complete than this and featuring more working levels and actual enemies and such. If those ever release, I'll definitely cover them, but for now, we gotta move on. And by move on, I mean in the video. I did have one more game planned, Millennium Racer, but I couldn't actually find if this was released or not. A lot of conflicting information out there on it. It might have been released for Windows, however the Dreamcast version might have just been a prototype, I don't know for sure. Well, regardless, if you liked the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like, maybe even subscribed. But for now, I'll be seeing you in the future. Have a good one.